Hello and welcome back to the Fresh Cut Podcast. Pastor Alanna here. We have with us today the most handsome pastor on staff.
Thanks.
Pastor Jared.
Thanks.
He, for those of you who don't know, hopefully you know, he is my husband. So it's okay. It's not that awkward for me to say that.
It's true. I don't think you're violating the HR guidelines I'm not aware of.
True. So today we're going to talk about something that kind of spurred from Jared and I just yesterday drove down to LA and back because we had interviews for our pastoral license. So we spent a lot of time in the car, and this was just something that came out of our conversation. And we thought, hey, that'd be a fun podcast to do. So this might be like a little mini episode, but we're talking about how good things come in small packages. So to start us off, Jared, what is your favorite thing that is good that comes in a small package?
Favorite thing, good small package. First thing that always comes to mind, that still as a 43-year-old man, I do love fruit snacks, like a 3-year-old. And so you get a box of fruit snacks, and then they're always in this small little foil stuff, whether they're Sharks, going way back, or any of the slightly healthier ones that say they are 100% fruit or whatever. But they're small and they're delicious.
Well, I'm sorry, but that was the wrong answer.
That's fair.
You're supposed to say, you, Alanna, my wife, is the best thing that comes in a small package, because I am only a little bit over 5 foot, 5'1.5" on a good day. So would you like to change your answer?
You can do that in editing if you'd like to, whatever you like to do. You can just dub it over top.
I'll just dub it over. Alanna is my favorite small thing.
There you go. Perfect.
So for me to answer my favorite thing that comes in a small package, I like desserts. You're not really a dessert guy, which I get a little bit jealous that you don't really have a sweet tooth, because it makes eating healthy easier. Yeah.
Sometimes, but yes.
But I do have a little bit of a sweet tooth sometimes. But Trader Joe's has so many of their little desserts that come in like little minis. So you can just have like one little drumstick cone, and it's just enough to satisfy.
A full drumstick is giant.
It is excessive.
Yes, it is. There is. You better have just some sort of little league championship to have one of those. Like, it just feels a lot. But the little hold-the-cones are fantastic.
Yes. Or just like a little macaroon or something like that. It's just enough to satisfy the sweet tooth, and just enough to, it's a good thing. It's a good thing in a small package.
There you go. Well done, Trader Joe's.
Well done, Trader Joe's. Okay, so the conversation that we were having in the car yesterday, we were just kind of going over some of our, obviously we're married to each other, so we know each other's stories a lot, but we were just sort of reflecting on different key moments in our life that seemed like they were just like a small thing, but turned out to actually change the trajectory of our life, and how interesting it is that God does that and takes something that you don't really notice is going to be make a big impact on your life. But then you look back and you're like, oh, that was the catalyst. It was something so small, but it actually really changed where God took me in life.
And it's that perspective that you're not going to answer that right away. It's, okay, now looking back on my teenage years, or looking back on junior high or whatever, is when you can claim what you lived through, and the little moment that you was very ordinary. But
so what would you say? What did you, as you reflected upon it, what was a key takeaway, something in your life that was oh, this seemed mundane at the time, but now looking back on it was that was a major force in my life?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, yesterday, both of us in our interviews, you start off getting to know you, but then also it's hey, tell your story. And so it definitely gets into that testimony, into that story. And for me, the beginning, as they're trying to get this okay, what is your salvation story? And for me, it started out, I grew up in church, so there's always this understanding I had, but there was a very definitive 5th grade summer camp, and truly my first summer camp experience of going away and being taught, and all the good things that come, that's way more than a normal Sunday school thing or anything else. And so for me, there's definitely that, to where at camp was the first time where it was altar call for me, and a moment of recognizing, I probably labeled myself a child who lived in a Christian home, but like made it very clear, like I am not a child who has made my own belief. And
you'd say that you made that stipulation in yourself, like as a child, like you did not, because I feel like most kids that I know that grow up in the church and they don't, accept Christ or have that salvation sort of moment until later. I think most of them would articulate that I already like, I grew up in a Christian home, therefore I am a Christian. But you didn't think that?
If there's anything I can sort of remember in a maybe good way and maybe a bit too guilty and whatnot as far as asking, I will credit as far as, and I can even remember as far as, I think the dude's name was Larry Bubb. Larry Bubb, like Bubb, was this like straight out of the 70s acoustic guitar playing worship guy preacher at this elementary summer camp. And definitely his preaching, his altar callness brought out this, you might say you're this, but you're not. That I will give credit that in that moment is where I recognize. And even then, as I shared with people last night, like it was very, you need to come forward, you need to come accept Christ, and you need this. And I definitely felt it, knew I needed to do it, and didn't do it. Of like
in that moment.
Oh, I did not do it. Whatever that was Wednesday night or whatnot. I did not do it, and sat with that for like, and probably didn't express it to anyone, but sat with that for like all the rest of Wednesday night, all of Thursday, and then Thursday night he goes back into an altar callness, and like a few more kids come down, and how I remember it, he basically just like kept going and was like, "There's a little blonde kid in the back who has not come down."
No way.
Yes,
Seriously?
yes, and it was like, again, Pastor David would always tell how his call to come to New Life, and like, well, we could either go in a boat or go in a fish. Like, I definitely was like, oh, he's calling me out
Wow, Larry Bubb.
Yeah, there you go. I'm gonna have to now Google him, but or maybe not. I don't know.
Larry Bubb, I hope you're doing great things in life.
Go.
Thank you
there
for changing the trajectory
there you
of my husband's life.
There's a trajectory moment. That definitely was a moment that, like, again, even maybe I need to be convinced. It wasn't even just maybe I didn't. Like, it was definitely I didn't, then did, and so definitely it's coming back home, telling my family and them celebrating that, which was great. And even just in my own church, that, it definitely was, they were organized and had a class for elementary school kids who have accepted Jesus to, like, I think for all of that because it was in the summer, all that next fall, I went to classes to kind of unpack which I don't really remember, but I remember I went to classes, and then I got baptized on Christmas Day in someone's backyard in a jacuzzi, because that's what our church was doing. They didn't have a building or anything like that. And so, it was like Christmas 91 was there's a VHS tape somewhere in our garage of me with like 10 other people. So that's the first, as I think through, like, for me, that would be a salvation story, and kind of even retelling that yesterday with people and stuff.
Yeah. So when I was thinking about a moment in my life that seemed like it wasn't a big deal, but turned out to be a gigantic deal, in a good way, was I was in junior high, and I had just been coming to church, and I had been involved in youth group, and I had I hadn't really been involved. I'd mostly just been one of those, because it was a big youth group, and you could kind of come and go and disappear if you wanted to. And I didn't really want to disappear, but it always is scary when you're like in a big youth group setting to like reach out or something like that. And
especially if you're new.
Yeah,
like
especially if you're new. Yeah, and I had drug my friend Ryan, who's a girl. Shout out Ryan, hi. I had drug her along to church with me. She was my friend from school, and neither of us had any sort of faith background, church background. But I had started coming to church when my mom forced me. My mom was going to church at the time, I should say that. And my mom forced me to go to the junior high ministry. Thanks, Mom. Another catalyst moment. And I really liked it, but it was overwhelming socially because it was so big and I didn't know anybody. So that's where I drug my friend Ryan with me. And so we had been coming and just kind of coming and going and just like sort of, enjoyed the service. And we had, this is, I don't know, should I share the embarrassing stories part of this?
That's why people watch.
And
listen, let's be honest.
They watch for our embarrassing stories. Okay, I'll share the embarrassing story. So we had been coming, and it's junior high, so you start to like look for the boys in the room. And so we had come, and we were kind of on the outskirts, didn't really know anybody, but there was this group of people of junior hires that were very involved. They sang in the worship band. They, did student leadership. They were like really involved. And Jared was one of those. Jared was one of those boys who was in that group.
I was one of those boys.
Very involved at this time. And Ryan and I had been watching from a distance, and there was something very attractive to that group, to that friend group. Now I know it's the Holy Spirit that I was drawn to, but I didn't think about that as a 13-year-old. Didn't
Look
quite
at the Holy Spirit on that one. Yes. No.
Oh, you make that sound so awkward.
Yes.
Now I know. Yes, but at the time we had kind of just that friend group in general was like they seem like they're good people, like they're good friends. They're funny, they're fun. Like I wish that I could infiltrate that group. And we had each, picked a boy that we thought was the cutest in that group and gave them a code name. Because this is a time before text messaging, so we would just write notes back and forth to each other.
A beautiful time in the world.
Yes. So the boy I picked that I thought was the cutest in that group was you.
There you go.
Was Jared, and we nicknamed you French Fry. So I don't know if that's offensive or not, but so anyway, that's kind of not really the point of the story, but we had been watching this group for a while and just feeling drawn to it, but not knowing how to introduce ourselves as, 8th grade girls that feel like they're on the outside. And so we had been coming to youth group, and then there was one week that we were leaving, and we had, taken notes. We had pens, and they were collecting the pens at the back of the room. And we had sort of started walking by, and then Katie, who was the main female leader at the time, she was, she would teach, she was involved, she was, the kind of the main female leader that we all looked up to because she was so cool. And she made a joke to us about stealing the pens. And it was just like, oh, you're going to walk out of here. You're going to steal our pens, huh? And so we laughed. We put the pens away. And then she asked our name. And so she introduced herself, and we exchanged names. And then, Ryan and I promptly walked out. We're like, we met Katie. It was like almost like meeting a celebrity at the time, because she was just like that. She was older than us, and she was like that big sister kind of, and she was just really cool. And so we were like, oh, we met Katie. Then the very next week, we went back to church, and we were so used to just coming and going. And Katie came up to us, and she remembered our name. And it was both of our names. And it was, at the time, this was 1995, I think. About 1995, 96, somewhere in that. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, because it was my 8th grade year, which was 95, 96. And so it was as if like Mariah Carey herself had remembered our name, because it was just like, wow, she knew my name. And from then on, she just always introduced herself. And then it was just, I don't know if it was that same week or just a couple weeks later, she invited us to come hang out after service. Like your group of friends that you were in, the tradition was they would go to the lake. And there's a lake that was just like a man-made lake, but anyway, that sounds context. But yes, so they would go to the lake, and
it was a great place for junior hires to hang out because you could loiter, and it was totally fine. As far as our master plan communities had a lake that if you lived in that city, you had a card that you could get into, and you could basically spend very little money, but it was a place to hang out.
Yes, that's exactly what it was. We could loiter there and hang out, and in a safe way. And Katie would go, and some of the other leaders would go, and it was just kind of like she invited us to go hang out at the lake. And so we were so excited, and we went. And that was like, when I look back on my life, like Katie Sadler Edwards, shout out Katie, love you still. Her just remembering my name changed my whole life. I know that sounds like such like a exaggeration, but like honestly, like where I'm at now, like serving in ministry, like going through the ordination process, become a pastor, and even other things like meeting my husband, and that whole that whole thing.
Which didn't start there.
No,
Like,
yes.
that's also, especially us doing student ministries years, where like we didn't start dating 2 weeks later as an 8th grader, and then now, whatever, like that's another podcast as far as the story and timing of that.
No,
But
in
known
fact,
each
I
other
think it was
since.
pretty much like 2 weeks later I moved on from you and liked one of your friends, because that's just how junior high works.
This is very
so it
much
took a very long time for us to figure out.
Also, I had been praying for one of my friends to start coming to church, and he did, and he was very good looking and outgoing and whatnot, but did not have the Holy Spirit yet. What was such a great process too, as far as bringing in definitely the most popular thing I ever could have done was bring him in, that everyone wanted to get to know him and stuff. But definitely that impact and that invitation culture, and us even doing student ministries and in general and just ministry for years. The story of remembering your name is something that, like, when we've trained youth volunteers, we try to never not hit on how important just the smallest, simplest little thing, and whether a youth ministry is 12 people or is 250 that are coming. Like, if anything, there might be some of you listening to this that are like, you're putting this in your own context, and maybe your first taste at a church or your first invitation to a youth group is like 12, or someone's like, well, the lady should have known your name. Like, the context of that is you were brand new, and you were two sort of newish girls into a 200 or something junior high ministry.
Right.
And so the expectations was like, oh, Katie will never remember her name.
Right. Yeah. And it obviously it goes way beyond youth ministry, because that's something that has stuck with me so much. And I understand that as such a huge part of my story and a huge part of how God just grabbed a hold of me and was like, because if I look back at that time of my life, you know, I was always a good kid, but it was junior high when you start to get that temptation of like, well, these kids are cool and they're doing these things that are not good. And I want to be cool. So I felt like it was at this crossroads of my life where it was like, I kind of want to go this direction, but God very quickly was like, nope, you're going this way. And I'm going to use Katie and this youth group and this group of kids, and then just this one moment to shift you from going from one direction to the other. And so it goes obviously way beyond that, because it's something that's so ingrained in me now that, I mean, I'm definitely not great at it all the time, but I try very hard to remember people's names, and I fall short so much. But to me, it is a big thing, because you never know how much that actually might mean to somebody. And how much that could, and obviously it goes beyond just knowing somebody's name. There's the second part of that story is her inviting me into something deeper. And that is, that I think is something we can all do as we come to church or we meet somebody, is just to like go that one step further, like actually learn somebody's name. And even especially if you ask something, that's always something that's so huge to me too, is if I'm talking to somebody like on the patio after service one time and I mention something that's happening this week, and then the next week they follow up with like, hey, how was your test? Or how was that thing? And it's like, oh, they remembered, like they took an interest in my life. Like, you just never know what kind of an impact that might make. So I feel like if you're listening today and you might think like, hey, how might the Lord stretch me? It might be something small as like being more intentional in those sort of surface casual friendships, conversations that you have on the patio or during, after church, or maybe out the side of the soccer field. And just like, how might you take something that seems very surface level and it actually just might change somebody's life. Yeah.
And it's those small little things that, again, you might not even, that person or you might not know the difference for another 6 years.
Yeah.
As far as what that can be, but seizing an opportunity to actually do that. And, so much of you, and looking at Katie's example in your life, it wasn't just that she remembered your name. Like, you weren't just stoked the next week, you were.
Yeah.
But it was that she took an interest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, if there's anything to like encourage, like, and I would say that both of us, the relational style of life and ministry that we aim to do and want to do is because we're products of that. Like,
right. No, exactly.
You look at people, but all of that, like, oh, how to be better relational, it starts oftentimes with that small little thing of just remembering a name, taking an interest, and especially when I think people just don't think someone will anymore.
Yeah.
As far as
it is something missing from our culture.
You've got so many things going on. And even in our world, it's either we assume people are busy, and it's like, oh, in the busyness, you never would. Or even in our context, as far as like being here at New Life, like for many people, we are the largest church they've ever interacted with. And so even like their expectations on whether it's staff or whether it's key volunteers or people who actually are on the platform, they would never, like that was, again, your big thing with Katie is she was on the platform. She was the main female. Like that is something I feel like both of us don't take lightly of recognizing like, okay, we're in a place of, and I love how much we here have been placing other people on platforms. Or again, when you look at, I still see even you talking about like from the outside, looking at this core of students, like that exact same thing is playing out amongst our church, that there's, hey, there's this core of people that like are on a crew or serve or like are part of the like you choose whatever area, like, hey, there's a group. I wish I could be a part of that. Like,
yeah, I think that's something else that I think looking back on that time, I had this assumption that was an exclusive group, like I had this assumption that like, oh, they're all friends. They're not taking applications for new friends, right?
We sit at this table and on Wednesdays we wear pink.
Right. Yes. So I had, even though I probably didn't articulate that, I had this assumption that it was an exclusive group. And I think sometimes if you come to church and you aren't involved yet, you can have that assumption still now to this day, like, oh, the worship team is a closed group. It's exclusive. I'll never be able to be a part of that. Or these people who are very involved in church, who know what's going on, who are fully alive in Jesus, like that's a closed group, right? And it's like, no, like, so I don't know, I guess this podcast goes out to two different types of people. Like if you are somebody who is in, you feel like you're in, like you belong, like you feel comfortable, like look for somebody else, and how can you remember somebody's name and invite them in, because we don't want it to be an exclusive group. And if you're somebody who's just like, casually attending, don't make assumptions that it's an exclusive group, and maybe take a step too to like introduce yourself, because you never know, it might be, I was too afraid to do it, so Katie had to do it, but if I had maybe stepped out further, it could have happened earlier.
So if you accuse someone of stealing a pen this weekend, or when you listen to this, it's going to definitely be this, I am trying to invite you into changing your life 24 years later.
Yes. All through stealing pens.
All through stealing pens.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining us. I guess
go.
That's good. Yeah? Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, it's kind of like a little mini episode, just something we were talking about that was like, I feel like this would be good just to start a conversation and, hopefully makes people think a little bit about just those conversations that they have on the patio, and even just, like you shared in your story, like not even making assumptions about where people are at spiritually too. Like people might look like, oh, they're a Christian, but like actually like calling something out in somebody like Larry Bub, having the boldness to actually be like, no, I think there's God wants something more for you. Like make a decision, take a step, push yourself further. Yep. All right.
Okay.
Well, thanks for joining us, Fresh Cuppers.
There you go.
We love you. We'll see you next time.
Have a good week.